want to play it smart.
Yanko, Bongo, let's go!
A brand new start.
Yanko, Bongo, let's go!
Hutch, I want to fly.
Yanko, Bongo, let's go!
Give great a try.
Live your best life every day with the Smart Network. Hutch, go smart.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the webinar on business. Welcome to the webinar on business planning in the age of AI. On the onset, I would like to thank our sponsors, Hutchison Telecommunications Lanka Private Limited and London Stock Exchange Group Sri Lanka. Without further ado, I would inform everyone of the house rules. Kindly switch off your cameras and mute your mics. Only the speakers will use their audio and video for their presentations and dialogue. Questions from the participants will be taken only through the chat box. A recording of this meeting will be shared after the conclusion of the session. I now welcome Tarindu Amarasekara to take over and commence the session. Over to you, Tarindu.
Thank you very much, Nisansala, for that wonderful introduction. A very warm welcome and a big round of applause to all those who have joined us today and also all our lovely speakers who are very well experienced in this sector and in this industry, who have a wealth of knowledge to share with us today. Now, as you all know, artificial intelligence is one industry, one sector that is said to be growing exponentially and reaching values of more than $200 billion and beyond over the next 5 years. So in this kind of a scenario, where does exactly AI fit into your organization, into your workplace? That will be our focus and that will be our area of discussion today. Because when it comes to artificial intelligence, there is a lot of talk, there is a lot of debate regarding this, where it fits in, how you can use it for your business activities, but we need to demystify some of these knowledge, and that's exactly what we are focused on today. It's not always about the technicalities. We live in an era that artificial intelligence solutions and systems can be developed for businesses even with limited technical knowledge. But before one starts swimming in the water, it's important to know how deep it can be. It's important to know what exactly is going on in this space and what are the crucial different elements that you need to be aware of before you invest your valuable resources into artificial intelligence. Because when it comes to technology, right investment can get you the right returns. Wrong investments can end up being a disaster that might be very difficult to recover from. Now, having said this, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day. So as you are aware, based on the agenda that was shared via the Chamber of Commerce as well, the session today will consist of 2 presentations and followed by a panel discussion. So feel free to share your questions as Nisansala said through the chat, and then we can take it up from there onwards. So our first speaker for the day is Mohit Pandey. Mohit is a co-founder and senior vice president at Linear Squared. Mohit has 20+ years of experience in tech leadership roles in both Microsoft and Google. As the former country manager for India for Google Cloud, Mohit was instrumental in building the cloud business for Google in India. Prior to Google, Mohit held many senior leadership roles with Microsoft in India and Southeast Asia. He has extensive working experience in the tech sector and the digital landscape, and especially when it comes to building businesses and leading high-performance teams across India and Southeast Asia. And with that resounding introduction, it's my absolute pleasure now to hand over the forum to our first presenter of the day, Mr. Mohit Pandey. Mohit, over to you.
Hi. Thank you so much, Tarindu. Am I audible and visible?
You are absolutely audible, not yet visible though. We would love to see you.
Okay, my camera is turned on though. I can see myself. Maybe it'll come up. But good morning, everyone. Really a pleasure to be amongst all of you today. Thank you so much, Tarindu, for that introduction, and to the chamber for giving us this opportunity to talk to you about business planning in the age of AI. Let me share my.
Mohit, just to confirm, we can now see you. Thank you. Please go
Okay,
ahead.
awesome. Awesome. Let me share my screen. I think I can hear some background noises, so I would just request the audience to mute their, to put themselves on mute. Give me a sec. I'll just share my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen, Karin?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So let's kick off straight away without any further ado around the topic which you're going to talk about, which is essentially artificial intelligence and business planning. So as the name suggests, basically we are going to talk about the application, the importance, the impact, and the operational intricacies of how you can incorporate artificial intelligence in your day-to-day running of the business. We are already, all of us are seeing different kinds of impact of AI into each one of our businesses, and we should be able to see how we are. Give me a sec. My screen is just switched off. How should we incorporate artificial intelligence into our day-to-day businesses? So if you can see my screen, I just wanted to reconfirm, is my screen still visible to all of you?
Not right now, Mohit. We lost your screen.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, let me. Is it visible now? I should probably stop the sharing and then reshare it once again.
Maybe under Windows, you can pick the specific window you wish to share. That might. Now I think it's.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes, now we can see. Now we can see your screen. Yes, we can.
Okay. Let me switch off my camera also. Okay. Awesome. So today, basically, let me just put this. Sorry about this technical issue, folks. Today, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction around the importance of AI into business processes. And then my colleague, Sanka, who's a very accomplished data scientist, is going to talk to you about how to make that operational and take that forward. So essentially, artificial intelligence is not new, right? We've been seeing this phenomena grow over the past couple of years. I mean, if you look at your phones today, the phones can recognize your voice, they can recognize your face. There is face unlocking. You can ask your Siri or a Google Assistant or an Alexa to do stuff for you, voice recognition, text to speech, speech to text, etc. All of these are examples of artificial intelligence really seeping into our day-to-day lives. But really, I think the businesses have been a little bit of a slow adapter, if I may use the word slow adopter, of artificial intelligence, because business processes are fairly complex and have significant impact onto the onto the critical workloads that they've been a little bit cautious in adopting AI. But that's really in the past. We've really seen over the last couple of years machine learning, which is really a kind of a component of AI on how do you start building AI systems. Machine learning and artificial intelligence adoption in businesses has grown significantly globally. the spending on these systems is very, very large. Last year, businesses across the world spent about $50 billion, and it's going to more than double in the next 2 to 3 years. And we're going to see almost $100+ billion of spending on AI and machine learning based platforms. In fact, COVID has actually accelerated the growth of digital transformation in businesses. So what's really happened is that companies have jumped on to the machine learning and AI bandwagon and are adopting these systems at a much higher velocity. Almost 30% or almost close to 1/3 of the companies are already using some form of AI into their businesses today. And almost 45% do intend to use in the next 24 months. So essentially, in the next 2 to 3 years, we are going to see a significant. Yep. Sorry, guys, I can hear some background noise. If you could just
it's
mute
a
your phone.
final TT settlement.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
AI
Mohit,
is going to be.
sorry, Mohit, 1 second. Khalid, can you please?
Indian companies and Blueberry Global.
Okay, Mohit, go ahead. Thank you. Sorry about that. Mohit, I believe you have been muted as well. Mohit, you might want to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think I was muted also. Right. Yeah. So artificial intelligence really can take many forms, in a business. As you see, as businesses have started automating themselves over the last couple of decades, using various forms of software, hardware, ERPs, etc. I think artificial intelligence is kind of following a similar trajectory where we are using machines to manage these software, and hence AI can take different forms. For example, CRM is one of the first areas where a large-scale adoption in terms of machine learning and AI-based platforms is taking shape. Enterprise resource management is another area where artificial intelligence is helping traditional ERPs take their impact to the next level by using data and analytics, etc. And similarly, we can see that in software platforms, infrastructure systems, and so on and so forth. And if you typically see the rate of growth of all of these is significantly high, we are seeing anywhere between 12 to 13% to almost 25% in 2020, and this will kind of significantly go up in the next 2 to 3 years there. AI software platforms seems to be kind of growing significantly fast. It essentially means that AI platforms will continue to lead the way businesses onboard themselves onto artificial intelligence platforms, which means that you will have a platform. So essentially, businesses will adopt platforms rather than build everything on their own, and that is where I think the subtle difference lies, and we are going to talk a little bit more about that down the line. And why are businesses adopting all of these? Because they obviously see a lot of positive impact really coming in by adopting machine learning and artificial intelligence. There are very straight efficiency and productivity gains because there is obviously a lot of automation. As Sanka will explain you down the line, what artificial intelligence does is to automate a lot of human repetitive tasks. It kind of gets intelligence out of data and either leads or helps in decision making, which essentially means that humans and human mind is available to do more strategic, impactful tasks, and repetitive tasks can be done by the machine, which leads to productivity gains. This leads to speed of business, better decision making. Also, one of the things which AI has really enabled is the fact that it doesn't just make existing business processes better and more efficient, but it allows you to to kind of explore and create new models and new businesses which you never thought could be done earlier. I mean, a small example of that is chatbots or bots, kind of doing customer engagement. We have telecom companies and a lot of other utility companies where automated voices can call you to remind you about your bill payments or thank you for making or purchasing a service, and they can literally interact with you in a human-like voice. Now, these capabilities were never thought about maybe even 3-4 years back. Now, so AI is helping us reimagine a lot of business use cases. Customer service almost takes a huge leap in terms of how it can help companies stay engaged with their customers, because you can instantaneously react. There are natural language processing which allows you to get the sentiment of a conversation, so you can see whether the customer is angry or happy or unhappy and kind of respond accordingly. And all of that machines can do without humans. Humans can still have either some level of biases, and all of that can get removed when you incorporate artificial intelligence. And then there's obviously reduction in errors and better engagement, even of people, right? Today, HR systems internally within companies are using artificial intelligence to do performance management, to do employee morale boosting. In fact, there are systems which can kind of alert companies based on employee activity to say that, okay, this employee seems like might be unhappy and could be a risk to the organization in terms of leaving, so you might want to engage. So there are thousands of use cases which artificial intelligence is now enabling within businesses as well. But these are some of the common use cases which all of you can really adopt to take your first steps into artificial or incorporating artificial intelligence into your business processes. Managing and analyzing data, I think that has been done probably by most of you. You've got internal teams doing it. Data analytics, going from analyzing data to predictive data analytics, where you can predict based on your historical data what's going to happen in the future. I think that's been there for a while. You can automate workloads, improve customer service, automate logistics, route planning, increase efficiencies in manufacturing, better deployment of your marketing, advertisement, etc., and so on and so forth. But the two most impactful lower hanging fruit or easier use cases to implement is really predicting demand and optimizing inventory. These are basically big problems to solve for most companies, to be able to predict accurately what your demand or what your sales in the future could be like. And then if you are in the business of manufacturing or selling anything, you plan and optimize your inventory, whether it is at the downstream level of your finished goods, so that how much should you keep at an outlet or at a warehouse or at a regional level, or even manufacture at a factory level, and then go back all to your inventory of your raw materials for your manufacturing. All of that can be impacted significantly by using AI-based systems. So essentially, if we talk about supply chain, demand forecasting, inventory, that whole framework of supply chain, there is immediate significant impact. In fact, a McKinsey study really says that companies which do adopt machine learning and AI platforms see up to 50% drop, between 30 to 50% drop in errors. There is almost 65% improvement into lost sales, because inventory out of stock situations is a big problem, right? Both overstocking and understocking in inventory is a big problem, and that gets reduced significantly. Forecasting errors go down significantly. Obviously, that impacts your supply chain, logistics, inventory, everything. And then the consumer retail and goods industry, which has probably been one of the fastest to adopt AI and machine learning platforms, they almost 45 to 50%, 47% companies in this sector have seen use cases or early adoption in the case of inventory management. So I think demand forecasting, inventory management, etc. These are probably the starting points of your business planning or your operational planning in a business, and these are good places to start. Where you can straight use AI-based platforms. I'm going to give you quickly a couple of examples. So let's take forecasting, right? So I'm going to try and illustrate what is the problem which we see in traditional ways, in a way a problem is handled, and how does AI help you solve that problem. So let's take forecasting. Forecasting is not new, right? It's been there for decades. Every company does forecasting. All of you in the audience today probably either do forecasting yourselves or some people in your team do forecasting. So it's not new and it's fairly okay, right? Everybody does a okay job of forecasting. But there are three problems with forecasting even today, and that is primarily because of the way forecasting is done traditionally. The first one is very obvious: accuracy. Why do accuracy problems come in forecasting? Let's take demand forecasting, right? Because we are talking about supply chain. So why do accuracy problems come in demand forecasting? Because in 99% of the companies, you take some historical data. So you take your historical sales data of a couple of years or your historical demand data of the last few years, and then use that by applying some rules and principles to project a forecast for the future. So you use your, let's say if you are in 2021, you'll use your data of 2020, 2019, 2018, and put some mathematical formulas to it and try and say that, okay, what will be my forecast for August 2021 or December 2021 or January 2022, right? So essentially the principle is that your history or your historical performance kind of determines what your future forecast looks like. Now that's okay to get a rough idea, but there are many things which impact a demand forecast, right? Weather or rainfall or lack of rainfall or your pricing. So if you change your price, your demand goes up or goes down, or your competitor changes this pricing, or there is a macroeconomic change, let's say a dollar rate change, or there's an interest rate change, or inflation goes up or down, or you decide to significantly invest in your marketing activities and do television ads and increase your promotions and discounts, everything. All of that has got an impact on your future demand, right, when you do it. And all of this might not necessarily come from your historical data. The problem is that all of this doesn't get included in most cases when you're doing forecasting, is because it's too complex to include all of this and take the impact of each one of them to see how your demand is going to change. And hence, accuracy issues start coming in. The other is the issue of granularity, right, which is the issue of scale. I'll give you an example. Again, kind of sticking to demand and sales and in the retail industry. Assuming that you are a retailer and you sell 1,000 products and you sell them off 1,000 outlets, for example, the most granular form of business management or forecasting which you want to do is by product, by outlet. You want to go down to that level. You should be able to forecast demand for each product in each outlet, right? But look at the scale. Now, 1,000 products in 1,000 outlet means 1,000 into 1,000, 1 million forecasting models. Now, this is a tall order for even the largest enterprises, not just in Sri Lanka, but even globally. And that is the challenge which we face, and companies don't do it. And that's why they do forecasting either at just a national level or maybe at a warehouse level, maybe at a regional level, or you just do, instead of going by product, you just do product category and so on and so forth, right? So you don't go down to the most granular level. And the third is agility, because the forecasting scale can be very large and forecasting accuracy can become really complex. Forecasts are not done that often as they should be, right? Forecasting in most companies is a static process. You do a forecast for the year, break it down by quarter, break it down by month, and then measure your business in that time interval. But you need your businesses, your environment changes much faster, business imperatives change much faster, and there is a need for you to take decisions much faster than that interval, right? And you should be able to anticipate those changes, make data-backed business decisions, right? In most companies, forecasts end up on Excel sheets, and they are generally done either by consensus or gut feel or human experience and so on and so forth. There's rarely data to be able to back it up. And these are some of the problems we see with forecasting. Forecast Square, for example, is an AI platform which allows you to do demand forecasting and planning at scale very easily. Sanka can talk a lot more about that. But really, it allows you to take your historical data very easily, just drag and drop Excel sheets onto that platform. It automatically formats data and allows you to build complex business forecasts in a matter of a few minutes, maximum few hours, thousands of forecasts in a matter of few hours, really. Essentially, it uses AI to take not just historical data, but also all the other data which I mentioned. So should you want, if you think rainfall impacts your demand, or your pricing impacts your demand, or your ad spending impacts your demand, all of that data can be very easily used in, and it can build all those complex models in a matter of couple of minutes and hours, and you are very easily able to now see how your demand in the future or your sales in the future look like. These are systems which are built for business users, so you don't need a very large technical team or a data science team in your company, or you need to be dependent on them to be able to do all that. Business users, so if you're in finance, if you're in supply chain, if you're in inventory management, if you are in business planning, all of you could use these systems. It's as easy as using Excel. And then once a demand is well known, you could basically then start planning inventory, right? So your demand side variability can come in because of the forecast, and then you can take the supply side variability as to where what is your stock in transit, what is your stock in hand, how long does it take for your stock to arrive. With that, you can go down to optimize your inventory, or the system will optimize the inventory, saying that, okay, you need to order this quantity at this level, whether it's an outlet or a warehouse, in this number, so that you're neither overstocked, neither understocked. So basically, straight business impact. You let the system do all of that, let artificial intelligence decide it, and you eliminate all human errors or guesswork into inventory. Demand sensing, right? In the folks in the audience who are in retail probably know that when you're planning demand, there's a lot of complicated phenomena which can include halo effect, which can include cannibalization, substitute effect, etc. How do you include all of that into your demand planning, right? Again, artificial intelligence-based platforms like Forecast would allow you to do that. Scenario generation. Once you have a good forecast and you've kind of correlated it to weather, pricing, macroeconomic factors, you can then create future scenarios and take data-backed decisions. So you can say that, okay, if I change my pricing of this product A, how does demand change in the future? And product A may be related to product B, so does the demand for both of them change? Or if there is more rainfall or less rainfall in August, does it change anything, right? So all of those scenarios can be generated, and you can take very informed decisions. With that, I think, I would like to kind of conclude my speech. This kind of just lays down a little bit of an intro to how businesses can benefit using AI. What are some of the use cases you can use? I will now hand it over to my colleague, Sanka, to take you through how to make this relevant, how to implement this and make this operational within businesses, and for all of you to take advantage of all this.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mohit. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. And Sanka, I know you're all ready and raring to go, but just before we do that, let me kindly have the honor and privilege of introducing you for the forum today. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter is Sanka Porutotage, who is the co-founder, CEO, and chief data scientist at Linear Squared. And he is someone who firmly believes that data science can be productized for mass consumption. And this was also the purpose behind the founding of Linear Squared in 2015. And one main reason why Sanka is the brainchild behind the company's flagship product, Forecast Squared. Sanka has a master's in actuarial science and a PhD in statistics from the University of Connecticut. Sanka has many years of experience in key data science roles in organizations across Sri Lanka and the US. So, Sanka, the forum is yours.
Hey, thanks, Tarindu, for those very kind words. I hope you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, we can see you, and we can see your slides as well. It's a hat trick of success factors for our online webinar.
All right, cool. Right. So all right, guys. So let me let me just I think as a quick time check, I will not spend more than 12 minutes on this presentation, because I think we have a very interesting panel discussion after this. So let me just take a quick step back, right, and maybe try to talk a little bit about AI in general, right? So when we talk about AI, right, it's probably, if we take a step back and if we talk about intelligence, right, it basically, it helps us to understand AI a little bit better, right? And so let's not worry about the dictionary definitions of intelligence. But right, usually, right, when we think about human intelligence, right, we talk about some core capabilities, right? And these core capabilities are like, ability to see, and not just that, ability to see and understand something, right? So which is very important, right? So similarly, ability to hear and understand, right, what you hear, right? So ability to read and understand, right? So these are sort of very, very core human capabilities, right? That we sort of associate with intelligence, right? And the point that I really want to stress here is should be able to not just see, but to understand and interpret, right? So that is intelligence, right? So even a typical camera, which was invented probably 100 years back, 150 years back, can actually see an image, right? But it cannot interpret that image, right? But if you look at the maybe more modern cameras or an application like Facebook, right? It can recognize people, right? It can tag people automatically, right? Which means it can see the image and interpret that image, right? So that is very important, right? So intelligence is not just seeing or hearing or reading. It's about being able to interpret that, right? So so that is right. It's a very, very simple right way of defining intelligence, right? So and as right, so just I'm giving an example, right? So we can see this picture, right? And we can interpret this, right? I mean, this is a baby girl who's probably a couple of years, or probably less than 1 year old, right? So this is slightly an older boy, right? So we can interpret, right? I mean, that's the idea, right? Now, how do we learn, right? So that learning process is right. It's a continuous reinforcement process, right? That is how we learn as individuals, right? So we learn something, right? Whenever we are wrong, right? Our parents, right? When we were kids, right? Constantly reinforced, right? Whenever we made a mistake, right? So then that is how the learning process works, right? So artificial intelligence is basically, it's very, very similar, right? That is what I want to really stress here, right? If we want to come up with a generic sort of understanding of artificial intelligence, right? Artificial intelligence is right. We basically give these kind of core abilities to systems, right? So systems can see images and interpret those images. Systems can see text and interpret, right? So chat box, right? So you can see the text and interpret and respond, right? So systems, when systems have these core abilities, right? We say that okay, this system has artificial intelligence, right? So that is how I would very, very in a very simplistic manner right, define artificial intelligence, right? So intelligence is like these key components, and when machines can do that, right, right, so then we can say that these machines have artificial intelligence, right? So how do we make machines intelligent, right? So humans intelligence is right. So it's in our brains, right? So there's a neural network, right, which learns and stores all this information and continuously learns, right? So there is a set of algorithms called artificial neural networks, right? And we train the artificial neural network just like the way that we would train a human brain, right? We can train this artificial neural network, right? So that is how we bring in this AI capability to machines, right? Basically by using artificial neural networks, right? So it's at a very very high level. I probably went a little bit fast, but right, I just want to set some context into AI, because these days, right, everything becomes AI, right? Right. I've seen right, pie charts, bar charts have become AI, right? So they're not AI, right? So you can probably can come up with some kind of a understanding about what is AI, what is not AI. Right. So let's look at some common applications, right? And let's see if we can categorize them into AI and non-AI, right? Um, so one example, right? The self-driving car, right? By Google, which they introduced sometime in 2015, right? So this is obviously AI, right? So they have trained this car, right? So there's a trained neural network, right, which continuously learns, right, and it can interpret sound, it can interpret right, the images, the video streams, and all of that, and take action, right. So it's a very very straightforward slam dunk use case of artificial intelligence. But if you look at a production monitoring dashboard, right, so it may get data. Sorry about that. So it will show data on real time. It will have nice fancy graphics and all of that, but there's no learning or interpretation involved in that kind of system, right? So it's cool tech, right? There's lots of engineering behind that, but it's not really an application of AI, right? If you look at a campaign manager, right? I just came up with a name called My Target Group Campaign Manager, right? So is that AI? Right? So it depends, right? So that right, if that is AI or not, it depends what it actually does, right? So there are different kind of campaign managers, right? So the way it actually targets people, if it is by a set of rules given by the user, right? So maybe user can say, okay, for this particular campaign, I want to look at my loyalty customer base, right? And I'm going to target who have purchased during the last 3 months, and those who are between the ages of, let's say, 30 to 40, right? If I define that, right, if it is that kind of a campaign manager, then there's no AI in it, right? So because a human basically, right, defines the rules, right? There's no learning, right, in that system, right? So there's no AI there. Fingerprint scanners, right? There's very little AI there. A system that tells right, the, let's say, the customer loyalty manager, right, who manages that customer loyalty, right, who's going to churn, that again, that depends on the implementation, right? So if the customer loyalty manager has to define, right, who's going to churn or not, right? So then that is not AI, right? But if the system itself learns something, right, then it can be AI, but it really depends on the implementation, right? A phone that uses facial recognition to unlock, this is a simple example of AI, right? Because you can see that learning process, right, very clearly, right? So the first time you actually log in, if you buy a new phone which has facial recognition, the first time you log in, right, it basically, right, takes multiple pictures, right, and basically learns from that, right? And based on that, right, it basically takes this action of lock in or unlock in the phone, right? So there's a continuous learning involved, right? So that's a very clear use case of AI. So on and so forth, right? So I don't want to spend too much time, but I just want to give you a flavor of, right, what is AI in business, what is probably not AI, but still cool engineering, cool tech, but not essentially AI. Right. So let me talk a little bit about what I consider as standard AI versus non-standard AI, right? I call this facial recognition on a phone as standard AI because the only reason to call that standard AI is the data which is used for this particular use case is very standard, right? The data that is used for this use case or for this application is the image, right? So it's the image captured by the phone, right? So there's nothing else, right? So it's just the image. Image contains 100% of the information, right? That the system needs to make this decision, right? So the image contains 100% of the information. So the information layer or the data layer or the data input layer is very standard here, right? No one can ask for anything more other than the image, right, to make this decision, right? But on the other hand, if you look at slightly a non-standard set of problems, right, a system that tells the user or the organization, the customers who's going to churn or the customers who are going to lapse next month, right? Now, that is slightly non-standard, right? Because the data input layer for this particular application is non-standard, right? So there can be data from the CRM system, right? There can be data from many other systems, from their customer charging systems, right? If you are a telco or someone like that. Maybe there can be data from the social network, right? So there can be so many other, there can be totally external factors. Maybe there are macroeconomic factors, right? When the economy is maybe not doing so well, right? Certain subscription levels can go down, right? For certain kind of services, right? So many things can happen, right? So COVID is one example, right? So if you are a data subscriber, right, for a telco service company, right? So during these times where lockdowns are there, right, lots of people interact with each other virtually, right? So the chances of churning your data subscription is very low, right? So it's a totally external factor, right? So this data layer, it's very fluid. And that makes it non-standard AI, and it makes it a little bit more complex, right? Because because of the non-standard nature, right, of this of the kind of data, and that is one of the main reasons, in my mind, that the adaptation of AI in typical business applications, right, for typical businesses have been kind of slow. Because getting this data layer in order, right, takes time, takes effort, right, and takes some considerable amount of vision, right, and probably considerable amount of pre-investment as well. And that is one of the main reasons why you can see lots of AI users in consumer applications, right? Just like in this image recognition in a phone, right? But but slower adaptation when it comes to businesses, right? Because the data layer is sort of complex. Now, I'm going to probably, I'll stop within the next 5 minutes. I'll just take you through, quickly try to take you through a very, very simple application, right? So if you want to use an AI model, I think Tarindu, I think we don't have much time left, right? Why don't I maybe we can talk a little bit more about this in our panel discussion, right? Because I don't think we have more than 40 minutes left. I think I can talk about some implementation during the panel discussion. What do you think about that? Tarindu? Tarindu, can you hear me?
Hi, Tarindu, Niroshni.
Yes.
I think we can move on to the next
Absolutely.
segment.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mohit, and thank you very much, Sankar, for that very insightful presentation. I think I love it how I'm sure the guests appreciated it as well, how you both brought different facets of AI, one from a planning and a business perspective, other one from a slightly tech perspective, because business planning in the age of AI requires a subtle knowledge on both of these matters, I believe, and you definitely set the right tone for the rest of today's discussion. Before we move on into the panel discussion, Mohit and Sanka, I just have a quick question to the two of you. Actually, a few questions. Now, a lot of CEOs today that we see, they are not fully tech enabled. You know, they are not, their backgrounds may not be technology, they may have business background. Now, how could a non-tech CEO lead their organization in an era of AI disruption? What are your thoughts on that? Let's say I am a non-tech CEO and I need to lead my company. I need to lead it in the industry. But at the same time, I also need to carry out certain technology adoptions, like in today's case, AI adoption. What's the best way that a non-tech CEO could go about that?
Right. See, I think one of the main mistakes a non-tech CEO would make is right, not a non-tech CEO. What happens is, like, it's not just a non-tech CEOs. I think most companies make two kinds of mistakes, right? First mistake is, right, you know, they sort of there are simple things that they can do, right? Right, so trying to do too much, right, is probably it's a wrong place to start. You need to start with a very simple use case, something that you can achieve quite quickly, to, you know, build that appreciation, to build that skill set within the organization. So first is, you know, don't go for the most complex, right, this, you know, the holy grail of what you want to do. Start with something small, start with something achievable, right? So that process will help the organization to build that, you know, set of core skills, right? If you start with a something very complex, right, I think it's going to be difficult for everyone. That's number one. And the second thing is, right, I think it's about operationalization of whatever you do. Lots of AI projects end up in, you know, big reports or, you know, fancy dashboards, right? They're fancy at the very beginning, but over time, right, no one is consuming them, right? So you don't actually get a ROI, right? What you actually get is a nice report or a nice dashboard. So thinking about operationalization is important. So in the churn example I talked about, operationalization means maybe you predict who is going to churn, then you need to consider, okay, what is the kind of actions that you can take, right? And then you basically automate the system in a way such that you automatically take some actions, right? So then you have a total operationalized system of AI, right? And that actually it's slightly more complex. But if you just stop at predicting who is going to churn, and if that is the end of the project, then right, it's just a nice to have project, right? It's not going to drive any ROI for the organization. So you need to go that one step further to operationalize things.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, Sanka and Tarindu. So first of all, I think a non-tech CEO is a misnomer, right? I mean, all companies are tech companies now, and which essentially means that you use tech to enable competitive advantage, right? So if you're not going to do that, you can rest assured that there is a newer, leaner, more tech-focused company which has come and disrupt your own business. You may be in manufacturing or you may be in logistics, but these are all now tech-enabled businesses, right? So the first thing, like Sanka said, I think more than tech, it's a business decision, right? You have to find out which business pain do you want to solve, and you can rest assured that there's technology there to build it. So identify a business decision or a business process or a business use case which you think can have a large impact, and see how you can enable technology to handle that use case. Good indicators are that if there is repetition, or if humans are doing it, and if there is repetitive nature to that, it's ripe for AI. If there is enough data which is available and there is a structured decision making which a human has to do, it is a ripe case for AI to do it. If it is anything to do with processing previous data and projecting a future state like a forecast or optimizing it, I think machines can do it much better than humans. So I think we have to find out what is the business pain which you're trying to solve, and then look at technology to solve it. That's point number one. Point number two, similar to what Sanka said, I think it is a big build versus buy decision, right? I mean, if you look at the previous few decades, or most large organizations saw some sort of cost advantages and kind of built large technology or IT teams in-house to kind of do things like software development or ERP maintenance, or things like that, or do in-house software development. You need to evaluate with the advent of artificial intelligence. I think you need to very smartly evaluate that. Is it better that Sorry, I can hear background noises. Could you please mute yourselves?
Yeah, Dasan, case Dasan, can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Yes, Mohit, please continue.
Sorry. So what I was saying was build versus buy, right? So you might not have all the skill sets needed, right? Data science is a very expensive skill. Machine learning specialists are a very expensive skill. And most of the good people in these fields work for large companies like IBM, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, right? So you're unlikely to have those skills to build those things. So you should smartly evaluate and go for third-party options. Most options today are available to you as a subscription service or a pay-as-you-go service. You only pay for it if you use, and hence you should just go ahead and adopt those platforms. Most of these platforms are not intrusive. You don't need to do large integration, etc. Data can be transferred very easily. So I think those things help adoption of these systems very, very easily. So even if you're a non-tech CEO, if you can identify good use cases and get the relevant platforms which solve those use cases, you are able to kind of take good stride or make good strides.
Thank you very much, Mohit, for your thoughts, and also to Shankar. Now, I believe it is time to move into the panel discussion together with the participation of our two presenters. We also have two veterans in the field of technology and modern digital transformation in Sri Lanka. And it's my great honor to introduce them to you now. Joining the two presenters, Shankar and Mohit, for the panel discussion of today would be firstly Jeevan Jnanam, who is the Group CEO and founder of Veracity AI, and also Mr. Romesh Ranavana, who is the Chairman of Artificial Intelligence and Center of Excellence at Slascom. Gentlemen, absolute pleasure to have you, and welcome to the AI-aged business planning webinar conducted by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. I hope you can clearly hear me and see me as well.
Yes,
Jeevan and Vishant.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Jeevan and Ramesh. Yes, all right, excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. So without further ado, we would move into the questions. Jeevan, my first question is for you. Now, fintech is one area in which you are specializing in. Now, we hear quite often about the marriage between fintech and AI. What role does exactly AI has to play in the proliferation of fintech technologies around the world today?
Thank you, Tanya, for that question. I think AI, first of all, thank you for the Ceylon Chamber, and I appreciate the opportunity to kind of help businesses kind of use AI in their operations, and I think that's a much needed thing that we're doing right now. But I think, you know, where AI is really helping the financial industry is to streamline and optimize processes, ranging from, for example, credit decisions to quantitative trading, to risk, you know, to financial risk management, and various other processes inside the fintech industry or the financial industry are being used by kind of by used by the financial industry to kind of automate those processes, right? And I just wanted to kind of share maybe a few examples, if I can. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Jeevan, we can.
So this is one example of what we're working on. For example, in the insurance industry is this idea of automated damage claims, where the AI can kind of understand the different parts of a car. From the different parts of the car, it's able to understand what the damage is on that on that car, and this is for, you know, 80% of the damages are usually scratches and surface damages, and then on that damage, understanding, more importantly, estimating that damage. And this is a model that we've built for insurance companies, primarily in Europe and the Nordics, and doing quite well. So this is one example of something that you can build for, you know, or use in the fintech industry. And we've kind of built this over a period of time and understood, trained the images on over 2 billion images, and understood that we're probably 4th or 5th globally doing some this kind of algorithm. The first being obviously Tractable, you know, with over $60 million investment. But I think there's potential to kind of build these algorithms out of Sri Lanka and then take them globally. Another one that we're doing for the fintech industry is one that we partnered with MasterCard on. And this is kind of more around hyper segmentation and hyper personalized segmentation for, you know, credit cards. So usually banks will have, you know, 2 to 3 campaigns that they send out monthly, and they tend to be not relevant to the end user, you know, for what is sent out. And what we've actually done is we've taken CASA and credit card data, amalgamated it, but instead of sending maybe 2 or 3 campaigns, we'll send hundreds and, you know, maybe hundreds of campaigns but each of them being kind of hyper-targeted and hyper-focused. So this is an example of helping the banks become more fintech-like, which again is a great example of what is possible in the fintech industry. So I think these are two examples of what we're doing, and I think there are plenty other examples of what is possible. A big one being risk profiling, right? And I think a critical part of banks and insurance companies is to understand risk profiles for customers. And AI is an excellent tool for automating and categorizing of clients depending on their risk profile. Either using classification models like XGBoost or ANN, which are primarily based on historical data. Another great example of what AI and fintech can do is algorithmic trading, which is, trading very often requires the industry to look at data and make decisions quickly. And of course, machine learning algorithms can use this data much faster, make decisions much faster than people can. And I think the only prerequisite, obviously, is to have enough data, an abundance of historical data, market data, using other segments of data, etc. So the algorithm is able to detect patterns, and it's able to execute the trades automatically, and very much speed is a big part of the win for automated trading. And such models can be used by market makers for short-term trading, quick pricing movements, etc. A few other examples which I won't go into detail. So there are lots of possibilities inside, for example, AI in the fintech industry, such as churn prediction. Looking at churn, looking if your customers are moving out, and then giving them an offer to call win-back offers, and having a win-back team in your organization, and other tools like, for example, augmented research as well as possible. So, when we talked about trade earlier, using augmented research tools, a good example would be using satellite data to understand the number of cars in a car park, right? And from that, you're able to then predict, whether a particular retail chain is doing well or not. And that can be used to then be a lead indicator for buy and sell decisions on trade, right? So there are many examples and potentials of using AI in fintech and in the financial in the BFSI industry, in stock brokering, etc. So there's huge potential, and I think it's really for us to kind of decide where you want to play and where you have some data to kind of execute and build kind of AI ML models on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Jeevan, for sharing those thoughts. I think it was very, I would say, interesting to see how some of these world-class algorithms are in fact being built out of Sri Lanka, and I definitely think that's the way forward as well. Thank you for sharing that insight with us. I would now like to move into the discussion with Romesh. Romesh, now, hey, good to have you, man. Now, Romesh, we see and hear so much of talk about, look, will the robotics really overtake us? Will the robots start, the AI-infused robots, the smarter robots, will they start replacing the humans in the workplace? Somewhat to the effect of all these, from what we have seen in the movies in the 80s and 90s. But I believe today we are being very pragmatic about it, saying, look, it's not about replacement, it's about coexistence, it's about complementing each other. Now, for human workers to start coexisting in the workplace together with some of these robotic technologies, how should our learning and development strategies change? I would like to start off the discussion with you on that.
Yeah, Taindu. So that's a really good question, and that's something I've been asked quite a lot. And And the simple answer to that is people have to start thinking of technology not as competition, but as something that can assist you with your job. I mean, eventually, what a company is focused on, what an individual is focused on, is doing the best job possible or getting the best out of a particular individual or an employee. And this is where tools come in. You've got to start thinking of these tools that are available to you as assistive tools instead of somebody that's going to replace you. Now, there's a lot of hype within the industry. There's a lot of hype in the media about what AI can do and all that, but that's really very far beyond reality. Even if you take one of the most researched areas in AI, one of the areas where there's a lot of money going in, which is driverless cars. Even though Tesla has built an amazing fully automated driver system, if you look at the categorization of automation of cars, the Tesla car is still at automation level 2. So even if you take automation in most jobs, automation will come in slices. Initially, what we see coming in factories and stuff is we have a little bit of automated monitoring coming in. Then you have some sort of assistive technologies like advisor bots and stuff like that coming in. And the automation comes in slices, but the chance of a fully automated system coming and replacing a worker overnight is almost none. And this is where most people have to understand their jobs will one by one, there will be elements of technology which creep into their job, and they have to be able to adapt how they work to be able to use that technology. So instead of thinking, this technology is going to, replace me someday, what any employee, what any company's got to think is the technology is going to help me do my job better. If I don't use this technology, my competitor or the person seated next to me is going to be using that technology and they're going to do better at their job. So the idea is that how am I going to maximize my productivity, my output? And if that requires technology, you got to use it. And the big thing here is you can either be a follower or a leader. You can adopt technology once everybody else around you has adopted it, or you can be one of those people who starts adopting this technology before anybody else and you become a leader within your field. And for that, you know, you got to anybody who's an accountant or a designer or whoever, they got to start thinking like a technology manager. And me, I've spent the last 20 years of my life as a technology manager, and the biggest problem in my job is anticipating what's coming next. And and the process we've developed to deal with that is to always keep in touch with what's going on in the world. I mean, I still spend maybe an hour or two every day reading what's going on in the magazines, in forums, and all that. I know what's coming. And when I see something that I think is going to be relevant to my job, I then take the time to go and dig deep into it. Uh, and understand. And whenever something's interesting, I always try and bring it into my work and experiment. And this is how I've managed to keep ahead, at least most of the time, of the people around me on what I'm doing, and that allows me to do that. So it's really about continuous learning, continuous assessment, and continuous adoption, and not being afraid of technology. You've got to be able to explore first, and then once you see something interesting, bring it in. And if you avoid that side of your life, the chances are that somebody else within your field is going to start adopting these technologies, and however good you are at your job, that other person is going to do better because they are using better tools.
Some very valid thoughts there, Ramesh. Thank you very much for that. As you very correctly said, it's not about the fear of running away from technology. It's about really identifying where can technology come in, and so that how can I use technology so that I can do my job better.
That's
something that's taking too much of my time. If I can get technology involved, I can do something more valuable, more strategic, because there are still a lot of areas which technology can't do, and the human skill is there, but time is not there. I really like the perspective you brought there. I would now like to go back to Jeevan. Jeevan, now you spoke about the promise of fintech. You spoke about how Sri Lanka can really be the hub where these algorithms are being built. But let's talk about the fintech scenario in Sri Lanka, our own landscape. Numbers don't look too good. Only about 4% of transactions are actually happening via digital channels. And some of our regional neighbors, such as, for example, Maldives, who came way after us has really taken over us in leaps and bounds. Have we lost the advantage even when it comes to the regional fintech landscape?
So I think we need a lot more events like this where we get adoption and people excited and inspired about AI, fintech, AI, use of AI in fintech. So those are kind of two different questions, right? Like fintech does not necessarily mean AI. Fintech is a domain, and then AI can be used in fintech to automate processes and whatnot. And just going to the point made earlier about this fear of adoption of AI and this coming of singularity, I think history has proven that if you're on the wrong side of technology, you're going to lose, right? I think it was Henry Ford who said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. There are lots of examples throughout history where technology was feared first. When trains came, when cars came, people kind of feared technology, and you can see where they are. And I think even if we do reach a point of singularity, what AI does today, it hasn't reached general intelligence, right? It's a very specialized intelligence. It's able to do one thing really well and do it very at a faster pace than humans. And I think if you just to, like, the philosophy of it is, if you're very comfortable doing the same task over and over again, then you're on the wrong side of things. And I think I think those kind of things should drive adoption. But regardless, to come back to your question, I think Sri Lanka, the truth is we are behind when compared to the rest of the region. And I think there are some fundamentals in our ecosystem that are kind of preventing us from progressing. And I'd like to say what it's not, right? There is not a dearth of talented people in Sri Lanka. There is people who are smart, bright, capable, and I think it's not the people. But there are some problems that we need to get over to enable the people to then create the kind of environment, a fintech environment in particular, if to your question, that we want, right? And the AI environment in principle, right? So for example, the big one is that there's lack of data in open systems. And that comes from a lack of, the next one, like, for example, if I wanted to create an AI ML model, I would need data, and I would need problems to work on. And that's not available today for the talented kind of people that we have. So the first problem is data availability, right? And I think that stems from the second problem, which I'll talk about, which is really adoption, right? And looking at, I've spoken to several businesses here, and for example, I've shown you we're one of the top 5 people, companies in the globe providing automated damage claims to insurance companies. We've gone to every single insurance company here, and there's still a lack of adoption of using these algorithms in the local industry. So much so that the top 2 insurance companies in the Nordics are using it. Now, we're having very good discussions with Singapore companies, but Sri Lanka, there's still a large divide, right? And I think the second problem to really highlight is adoption, and that's both prevalent in private sector. There are some very kind of early adopters maybe in the private sector, but and that's what I think this discussion is so important, because we're trying to enable, inspire, and progress the private sector companies from adopting AI. And government is probably even worse, right? I mean, there are even though government should be publicly available, there's been a very slow progress of implementing the Data Protection Act, which I think people are working on now, and that Data Protection Act should enable open kind of data environments, which we kind of 3 years ago I put into the AI policy framework for the country, and they said we should have open systems by government where, if they're doing even say a traffic system, that data can be made available then to, for people to look at driving behavior patterns, right? Like, and then you could correlate traffic data with driving behavior patterns, etc. So there's once you have data available, the number of problems that guys like me or data scientists, etc., can kind of start solving, and that will then create new systems and improve the quality of life overall, right? So and also create this exciting space where we can all kind of grow. And I think in fintech in particular, when I went to the Singapore FinTech Festival 2 years ago, and we are not there because several fintechs applied and none got selected because we're not at that state of readiness to kind of go globally. And that's where now there's a fintech association under the CCC that is especially focusing on this, working with multiple stakeholders to try and get it to look at the environment. We have about 60 fintech startups. Most of them seem to be payment apps, and the payment apps problem kind of shows you where we're going, because you get all these banks with their own payment apps. I'm not sure that's the best case and use for adoption of technology and open data systems. Each bank today has their own payment apps, which is quite funny. But yeah, I think you can see you need to be open, you need to be collaborative, and I think the business adoption side needs to get better. And I think we're in the process of building under the CCC the fintech roadmap for the next 5 years, and it's trying to specialize and see where exactly we can go to. And I think with the next Hatch fintech cohort, we're in the process of building, for example, an open API where we integrate with all the banks, but there's only one location for to go for startups to come in, which is pre-qualified, etc., and has some quality processes in it to ensure that they can safely work with banks in a open sandbox environment. So there are things like that is progressing and happening, and hopefully next 3 years, with the help of everyone, we get better.
All right, some very positive sentiments there, Jeevan. Thank you for sharing that. I would now like to revert back to Mohit with regard to a more domain-specific question. We have a question being raised by one of our guests as to whether there is scope for AI in a field like the case of tea production, in terms of some real-world examples that where artificial intelligence can be really used for a company like a tea exporting company. Probably one of our guests today is from that sector. What would be your thoughts, Mohit? Mohit and Sanka, both, if you could chip in, and then I would come back to Ramesh.
Yeah. Sorry, Sanka can chip in further, but really, I think tea production is very interesting, and there can be different kinds of artificial intelligence based applications. I think there are examples where you could really look at the physical crop. A lot of it is being done in the US and some other parts of the world as well, where you could look at the physical crop and kind of find out the kind of produce you have, the kind of attention you need to give to different parts of the garden. But more importantly, I can talk about something which we have done locally, where as a part of Linear Squared, we have tried to predict tea auction prices, right? Tea auction is a big part of the tea industry. And, we've been fairly successfully, predicted tea auction prices on a weekly basis for different grades of tea. And it is just done using the same Forecast Squared platform, because the Forecast Squared platform allows you to forecast anything, right? And you could forecast tea auction prices as well. Sankar, do you want to add some color to how it was done and what kind of data was taken? Sankar? Yeah.
I think it's one use case. I think we know definitely for sure, right? By taking the demand influencers, the supply influencers, like the exchange rates and things like that, and by taking maybe weather-related variables, right? So you can actually try to forecast at a decent level of accuracy. But right, I think there could be many other use cases, right, within this industry. So maybe someone who knows a little bit more about
actually
industry can add.
Yeah, actually, we are working a lot with the tea industry. So do you mind if I take this?
Go ahead, Jeevan.
Sure, Jeevan.
So one of the things we're doing is with a company called Spectrify, which is owned by Veracity. And we're trying to do, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so what we do is we kind of try and predict the flavor profile and match the flavor profile with the chemical profile of tea. So what you do is you get the type of tea, the origin, the brand, the flavor fingerprint, and obviously this is so important for especially tea exporters who are trying to build value with their end customers and trying to differentiate and say, okay, look, we have a tea of a particular flavor and a flavor profile, but what we do is we back it by chemistry. And how we do this is we have a device called a spectral device, which is basically uses light to understand matter. And we look at light at different frequencies. Our device currently is at 750 to 1100 nanometer spectral range. And from that, you can predict by shining light on it, you're able to understand something, and looking at the light that's refracted back, you're able to understand something about the chemical composition of tea, by the bonds especially. And from that, you're able to kind of say, okay, this is a tea from, from high grown, low grown, etc. So what we do is we kind of go into tea exporters, tea tasting rooms, and we take spectral samples, and we're working with some of the largest exporters in Sri Lanka. And we take, for example, dry tea, infusion, wet, etc. And then we build, using our spectral device, we build an AI classification model, principal component analysis, other classifiers, etc. We're able to then understand, hey, this is candy tea versus Neurelia tea versus high-grown tea versus low-grown tea, and understand truly, for example, what is the correlations, for example, right? So just to give you one correlation between chemistry and flavor is bitterness. If you have more caffeine, for example, the bitterness tends to be higher. So we're in the middle of kind of building these models, and just to show you, this is a very kind of early video of what we can do. But and this is an early version of a device, but basically you put it into in your tea, and then you're able to say, hey, this is gunpowder tea, this is the caffeine level in it, this is the type of tea, whether it's green, black, etc. So we have come quite far in building these type of models. Just to share some of the kind of low-hanging fruit that we've done. For example, sugar detection is very easy for us. That's a big thing in tea, understanding whether your tea has sugar or not. I think some blenders put in sugar and it's meant to be caught. So that's a problem we've solved. We've solved crude fiber content as well using image processing. We're starting to look at pricing. We have a model that understands the classification of tea already, etc. So just to give you some examples of what we've done.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. Romesh, I would like to come to you with regarding more of a security style question. Now, how can we ensure in this age of AI, how can we ensure that there is proper cybersecurity in place? Because a hack attack is bad enough, but what if an AI system is hacked? Can the result and the impact be truly devastating?
I mean, yes and no. It all depends on the level of automation that's built into the system and the safeguards that have been built to deal with those type of attacks. And this actually comes down to how you build machine learning systems. In Sri Lanka, unfortunately, I mean, I've been studying this for several years, and machine learning is still considered an academic subject in Sri Lanka. The lot of the focus is on developing models. It's on developing models and doing a demo, but that is very similar to how machine learning has been done, for the last 20 years, or the 20 years before that. But now a lot of the focus is on production grade machine learning, where machine learning has now moved from a academic subject into an engineering subject. And if you look at even a lot of the universities in the US, they are now moving more from teaching machine learning as a technology subject to an engineering subject. It's just like when software went from teaching algorithms and variables and all that stuff into teaching software engineering. And there's a recent study done by VentureBeat, where they've studied about 5,000 organizations around the world who have invested internally in machine learning, and they found that only about 10% of those companies were able to take their internal developed machine learning models and put it into production. That means it goes into the field, the customers get to work with it, the workers get to work with it, but the remaining 90% do not get beyond the demo stage to either the internal development team or the board. It doesn't go there. And the reason for that is that once you build a machine learning model, that's just a black box where you send some data in and you get some inference out. You've got to build an entire infrastructure around that to be able to deploy it on an app, deploy it on the cloud, and then just like any software that you build, you also need the ability to be able to continuously keep updating it so that it can continue to be relevant. And that requires a software infrastructure, which there's still a severe lack of understanding. I mean, just like when you download an app, you keep getting updates to your app. So similarly with the machine learning model, you need to have the ability to be able to continuously keep training it so that it can keep up to date with what's required in the business or the customers or whatever. And a big part of creating that infrastructure is also error detection and anomaly detection. And if you don't build those type of structures into your system, exactly what you said, Karindu, when something goes wrong, something gets hacked, the system gets screwed and it starts coming up with decisions which we don't want it to, we will never know. And that's a big part of machine learning engineering, and that's something that even corporates need to get more knowledgeable on, the difference between machine learning and machine learning engineering, how to build production grade systems, and that's a big part of that. Taidu, you're on mute.
Apologies on that. I would like to share one final question as we approach the final round and as we look to wind up the session over the next 5 minutes. One case in point when it comes to technology that has always fascinated me is Taiwan. Despite being a country of that stature and despite all the challenges they may face from China, they've really come up in the world of technology, specializing in gaming. But today, if you look at some of the top games in the world, are actually coming from Taiwan. Now, do you gentlemen think that Sri Lanka has what it takes, what Taiwan was for gaming, that for Sri Lanka to be that in AI? Is that a long shot, and do we have the required university education systems for that? We can start with Jeevan, as we need to excuse him soon, and then we can move into Mohit and Sankar. Ramesh, I've got something specific for you later on.
Sure. Sorry, the question is, can Sri Lanka be Taiwan? Is in like Taiwan is in gaming? Can Sri Lanka be an example to the world?
AI, that's right.
In AI. Probably a long shot, but a shot worth taking. When we look at and I think it's also a matter of understanding what our strengths are and where we can play in the AI field. I mean, 3 years ago, we had literally maybe 100 graduates in data science and AI. I don't think that number has increased a lot. I would say it's maybe at around 400 graduates in data science and AI. I think we have to look at capacity, increase our capacity and numbers coming out of people. That's one. And when you look at it from a industry perspective, as I was chairman of SLASCOM, we want to take the industry from where we were, which was 1.2 billion to 5 billion. I think we can organically get to about 3 billion by 2025. The other 2 billion is going to come from startups creating IP, etc. And also, I believe increasing the revenue per head, which will be the kind of value added computer sciences like AI, data science, etc., robotics, etc. So I think if you're looking at it, and can we be AI in one of the leaders in AI in the world? We're going up against countries like Canada, for example, who started this journey almost now 7 years ago, have a lot of funding going into it. Their budgets are. When we looked at the AI policy, we looked at all the countries who are leading. Canada is the global leader. Second is probably the States. Third is China. And the amounts of funding that's going into kind of developing AI ML resources globally is phenomenal in those countries, right? The platforms that they're creating, so we have a long way to go. But my hope is we can always punch above. Sri Lanka's been known to punch above its weight, much like Taiwan. And I think it's for us to, as an industry, to come together and understand where we have some strengths in. And I think the question should be more, rather than are we going to be the best in AI, are we going to be the best in AI in cybersecurity, or are we going to be the best in AI in fintech? I think you can pick a subcategory and you can really own that subcategory. And I think that's where we as a nation need to figure out where we fit.
Thank you so much, Jeevan. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and have a good day ahead. It was a pleasure hosting you. I would like to get a few thoughts from Sankar very quickly on this matter. Sri Lanka's position in AI into the future.
Yeah, so Tarinder, see, I think my sentiments are quite similar to Roshan's, right? I think we consider AI as a academic pursuit, right? Machine learning, AI is academic pursuit.
Sorry, Sankar, I believe you mean Jeevan's.
No, I mean Romesh. Sorry.
Romesh, all right, okay.
Because I think right, so I also talked about this operationalization of machine learning, right? And Romesh calls it productization. We are talking about the same thing, right? Lots of things just die right at a report level, so lots of things die at that level. So we need to for the organizations to get the ROI, right? They need to operationalize it, right? So there's a massive engineering component to it. And I think that's where we can probably contribute more. Because Sri Lanka right now, we don't have lots of research going on in this area. Our undergraduate education, maybe it's still all right, but our graduate education levels are very, very poor compared to the rest of the world. I mean, that's the reality. which means we cannot do research level work. But what we can do is implementational work, right? So I think the opportunity probably here is, right, really focus on the implementational side of machine learning engineering piece, right? Maybe we can, that's probably we can focus on, right? So that would be a general direction that we can take, and probably the already established tech companies in Sri Lanka can and should take a hard look at that.
Thank you, Sankar. Ramesh, on a final note, a future where a human can walk into a hospital and trust an AI-driven robotic surgeon. How far off is that future?
I think we are quite a bit away from that. But over the next few years, what we will see is, little by little of those jobs being automated, where, you'll have an initial diagnosis being done by a computer. Because then the advantage of a computer doing it over a person is that the computer can compare the diagnosis against another million other diagnoses to see whether that's correct or not, and come up with recommendations to the doctor. And like that, slice by slice, we will see automation coming in, and maybe I don't know, I don't think any big change like that is going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years. But maybe beyond that, we will see more and more automation coming. Just a very simple example. I was talking to some designers recently, and they were saying, we work in a creative field. Why do we need automation? And then I took a simple example. What do you guys do during most of the day? And they said, we get images and we have to manually remove the background. And, so there are two designers. One guy does this manually, which means that he can do about 10 images a day, whereas there's another guy seated next to him, which uses an automated AI tool, which does background removal. And that guy can do 100 images a day. So that's a simple example of, how that type of very, very simple automation, which is not a big deal, can then flow into things like finance, medical, all that. So I think definitely, but it will come in slices. It's not going to come all at once. And a good example is to look at the car industry, where even with all the automation going on, it's still at level 2 automation.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts today. It was a very insightful and impactful 1.5 hours. My only hope and wish on behalf of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce is that the participants of today's program will go ahead and look at further avenues of implementing AI into their business, because that is the main goal, the main intention of this program as well. And I'm sure you found it insightful as much as I did. It was a pleasure hosting the speakers this morning and having you as our guests of this program today. And until we meet next time in a similar insightful webinar, I'm Tarandu Amarasekara and wishing all of you a very good day ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.